When I was at Bricktober, a local LEGO convention held in Perth, Australia, I had the pleasure of seeing this award-winning MOC on display. Let's discuss the techniques that were used, the inspiration behind the build, and the other many reasons why this creation is incredible. This MOC was built by Jane Gibson Ayer and is a recreation of a famous art piece. So here's the artwork that this build was inspired by. It's called Down on His Luck and is an 1889 painting by the Australian artist Frederick McCubbin. It depicts a disheartened swagman sitting by a campfire in the bush and sadly brooding over his misfortune. Right off the bat, what I adore about this MOC is the fact that it so accurately depicts Australian landscape. Australia's got such beautiful and unique landscape, and surprisingly, you don't really see it represented in LEGO form all that much. So it's lovely to see the colours like nougat, dark orange, olive green, and tan, because they kind of perfectly fit that landscape. And when you think about it, it's kind of insane how accurate those colours are and how somewhat common some of those colours are. So it's amazing that this is kind of the first time I've seen Australian landscape built in LEGO form. I also adore the backdrop on this MOC and how it was made. It matches the source material very well and has this sort of forced perspective to it, which I think is really cool. Seeing the sort of like slow gradient of the landscape and how it kind of transitions into the snot wall behind it, that's kind of a really lovely and seamless transition. And then we can also see some of these brown flex tube pieces that were just kind of clipped on with some of these different clip pieces, and then kind of tucked behind some of these leaves. So it starts to resemble, different tree designs and stuff like that. It looks really nice. We can also see just sort of behind that some of these white tiles for the sky, and they're kind of mixed in with some assorted like dark green and dark orange plates and things, which is kind of tucked away behind some of these leaves. And it's nice because it kind of gives this hint of sort of like further trees in the distance. So it's nice to see sort of like actual kind of like perspective and kind of layers behind this here. It's really well done and is a great way of recreating the source material there. We can see a lot of these different sort of olive green leaf pieces being used here. Now these were very common at our local Pick-a-Brick store, and I've seen these across a lot of different Pick-a-Brick stores around the world. So it's nice to see that these are some pieces that are a little bit more common and a bit easier to get in larger quantities, and seeing them being used very well in this MOC here. Always nice to see Pick-a-Brick pieces being used in MOCs so that they don't just get bought off the wall, put in a drawer, and never seen again. It's nice to see them in action. There's also a really lovely branch and leaf design being used across this MOC. So it's using some of these brown flex tube pieces for kind of like branches of sorts, and then we get some of these sand green wedge pieces being used as leaves. Now this looks great, especially when you kind of compare it to the scale of the larger figure here. It's nice to see them kind of more or less accurately representing leaves of sorts. It might be a bit more difficult to use this in scale with minifigures, but it's just a really nice design in the scale for this MOC. Now, the gentleman in this build is also very well made. I love seeing characters in LEGO form, and, it's something that's not easy to make, and I think it's even harder when you're trying to build a character that is, closely resembling some sort of source material, and then I think it's even harder when you want to build a character that has so much personality and character to them. And thankfully, this MOC ticks all of those boxes. The pose, the facial expression, everything about this is working together to give this man this sense of melancholy and sadness. I don't know, there's just something that's so relatable and so sad about him. And I think there's just such incredible skill to be able to capture that with plastic Lego bricks, putting all that emotion into this. It's cool. I really like the face design on this here. Again, so much emotion packed into this here. The idea of using these chi slopes to mimic sort of like closed eyes, and then this very slight gap here kind of showcasing the eyes just being maybe slightly open there. I love it. He's got a very hearty mustache as well, which is a bit of fun. Plus, like, kind of just all the hair in general on this MOC is very well sort of sculpted here. Even things like the little dip in his hat, just everything about him, it's so well crafted to match the source material there. It's cool. I also enjoy seeing these tan skeleton arm pieces, which came on a tan skeleton sort of like a training dummy from this specific Ninjago set here. So lovely detail and great to see those being used as sort of like fingers on this MOC here. It's very nice part use, that's for sure. The campfire is also very well built, using some of these trans-clear plates for smoke, and also seeing kind of like little twigs and things on the ground here. I think that's just kind of a nice touch. It adds to that sort of bush landscape of Australia there. And then before we go, let me show you how the backdrop was built here. So they've simply built it onto some large grey base plates and then sort of built a sort of brick border around that. So it's kind of mimicking like a picture frame of sorts. And then it's nice to see the sort of little Technic support down the bottom here just to sort of support it and hold it up there. So surprisingly simple when you look at it from behind here. So very well done. This MOC in general is just so unique, so exquisite, and so awesome, and just packed full of emotion and detail, which is something that's so hard to do in LEGO, but they've absolutely nailed it. So love your work. It's great to see. What an awesome MOC.